The Ultimate Husband. By Sky Kissing Wolf.
Episode 171. Although Daryl has committed a heinous act, as his father, you cannot be exempted from punishment. If you don't admit your wrongdoing today, I'd rather hit you to death. Old Master Darby said coldly. Smack. Smack. The rattan smacked Daryl's father's body as his fresh blood flowed on the floor. Luna was crying so much that she had lost her voice. Please stop hitting him. Please stop. If this goes on, you'll kill him. Stop hitting him. Yumi walked towards Old Master Darby. Grandpa, I think Daniel Darby won't be sorry until he's dead. He must think that you're old and compassionate and won't cause him any harm. Yes, Grandpa. If we don't punish Daryl and his parents, it won't be fair to the others, the crowd around them shouted. Hearing what others said, Old Master Darby's face turned green. Someone, use the domestic discipline. Tzzz. Upon hearing the two words, domestic discipline, most of the family members took a cold breath. Daniel's face also darkened in fear, and his body started trembling uncontrollably. The Darby clan's domestic discipline was widely known for its horror. It was well known as cruel torture. The ancient king invented the cruel torture method. It consisted of burning a copper pillar until it was bright red, then a person would be laid on top. Instantly, there was pin-drop silence in the entire hall. A few members soon brought forth a huge copper pillar, and they started splashing oil onto it to burn it. The spacious hall remained quiet. Everyone was shocked and unable to speak a word. I'll ask you one last time. Do you admit that you're wrong? Old Master Darby stared at Daniel. Daniel was dripping with sweat. He would be lying if he said he was not scared, but his family had done nothing wrong. Why would he admit that he was wrong? Daryl wouldn't do such a thing. No way. Daniel looked him dead in the eyes, his gaze filled with determination. How dare you? Yumi walked forward and slapped Daniel hard on the face. How dare you talk back? Your son is worse than pigs and dogs. Even now, you're still lying. Someone, put him onto the copper pillar. Old Master Darby yelled. Hearing that, the younger members surrounded Daniel and tied him up with a rope. They carried him to the side of the pillar. No. Luna yelled with all her might before her body completely collapsed. The copper pillar was burning bright red. Once he was on it, he would die. Not admitting your wrongdoing. Put him up. Old Master Darby said with a cold look. With that said, the men pushed Daniel onto the copper pillar. Ah, a loud and painful moan resonated throughout the hall for a long time. My son is innocent. My son is innocent. Daniel screamed with all his remaining breath, his skin was completely burnt. My son is innocent. My son would never do such a thing. Never. Daniel's tears fell uncontrollably. At this moment, he was completely disheartened. What the fuck? Arg. A loud growling was heard coming from the entrance. Rushing in from the entrance was Daryl with the blood-drinking sword in his hand. His eyes were bloodshot, and he rushed in like an irrational madman. Behind him was Dax Sanders with an axe, followed by hundreds of physically built men in black. You're unforgivable. You're all unforgivable. Daryl was entirely out of his mind. He swung his blood-drinking sword randomly at any passerby that came in his way. His father was being burnt alive. Rage overwhelmed his rational mind. Kill. Kill. Kill, he kept thinking. You bastard. Bastard. Old Master Darby stood up, pointing at Daryl with his body trembling. You're such a white-eyed wolf. How dare you come back? Take him down. Take him down. With his command, all the younger members rushed toward the men in black. Dax signaled, and about 200 physically built men from behind him swarmed in like a tsunami. It was utter chaos. Episode 172. Dad. Dad. Daryl yelled with his eyes red as he cut the rope loose with his sword and held his father in his arms. Meanwhile, Daniel's body was completely ruined. His body emanated a burnt smell as his skin and clothes swirled into a mixture of blood and flesh. Son, son. Tell me, did you do it? Did you do such a thing? Daniel mumbled with his pale white lips as intense pain overwhelmed his body, and he trembled. I didn't. I didn't. Daryl cried, his face covered in uncontrollable tears. That's good. Daniel said with all his remaining strength. With a faint smile, his eyes shut. They didn't know if he was dead or alive. Dad. Dad, don't scare me. Please, don't scare me. Daryl screamed till his voice was hoarse. He shook Daniel vigorously, but there was no response. Stop yelling. It doesn't matter if your dad is dead, he deserves it. Yumi walked in her heels, pointing her finger at Daryl. You grew up in the Darby mansion since you were young. Now you're back here with a bunch of men to cause trouble. Aren't you scared of being struck by lightning? Bam. Instantly, Daryl stood up slowly with his eyes as red as blood. He walked toward Yumi one step at a time. What were you doing? Yumi trembled at the sight of his gaze. She would never forget his gaze for the rest of her life. It was terrifying. Smack. Daryl swung his hand and slapped Yumi hard and violently across the face. He used all his strength in his slap. In the next instant, Yumi flew across the air for at least 10 meters before landing on the floor again. Ah, she spat out blood. Without letting her stand up, Daryl slapped her again, and again, and again. Slap. 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 The clapping sound was crisp and ringing. It terrified everyone in the hall. Old Master Darby dropped his walking stick, his chest rising and falling vigorously, as he staggered and struggled to stand up. It was as if his throat was blocked, and he could not speak a word. Daryl, how dare you hit your sister-in-law? Florian yelled as he picked up a stick and hit Daryl. Smack. The stick broke into 2 pieces when it hit Daryl's body as if it was as strong as stone. Daryl turned his head slowly. Smack. He slapped Florian, sending him flying in the air before he knocked against the wall at the far end of the room and slid down like a puddle of mud. However, before his feet even touched the ground, he felt a strong grip on his neck. Daryl's lips curled into a faint smile as he strangled Florian's neck tighter and harder. Florian was struggling to breathe, his face turning purplish blue. 3 years ago, you claimed that I stole our money and kicked me out of the Darby clan. But who'd have known that every penny of the $8 million I used to buy oil stocks was mine? They had nothing to do with you. Daryl started, with no emotion on his face. You. Florian was almost out of breath. He wanted to resist, but he had no strength left in him. 1 month ago, I invested $30 billion in the Darby clan. All of you claimed that I had evil plans, but little did you know that all I wanted to do was pay back the kindness you all showed me when I was young. Even if you mistreated me in the past, it didn't mean that I should do the same to you. Now a week ago, Jackson's wife was assaulted, and you all accused me. I said it wasn't me, but nobody fucking believed me. Daryl screamed irrationally. His words rang in the hall. All eyes were glued on Daryl, and nobody said a word. Dong. Daryl released his grip, and Florian's body fell to the floor. He took in breath after breath, his hand holding onto his throat uneasily. Meanwhile, Dax Sanders' men had beat up all the Darby clan members, and they laid helplessly on the floor. Silence. Complete silence. You would probably be able to hear a pin dropping to the floor. I, Daryl Darby, was raised and nurtured by Grandpa. Right now, my father could be alive or dead. Daryl said with the sword in his hand and his voice projecting with power as it resonated in the hall. He clenched his fists, the nails stabbing his flesh till it bled, but he did not feel any pain. If my father is alive, both of our debts and favors are wiped clean. If my father is dead, I want everyone in the Darby clan dead. V-Room. Lightning struck, followed by heavy rain. Daryl marched out of the mansion with his father in arms. Episode 173. Once Daryl was finally out of sight, Yumi crawled up slowly, running over to old Master Darby. Grandpa, this is unacceptable. Yumi was fuming in rage, her beautiful face was stained with mark of Daryl's palm and wounded with blood. Old Master Darby was trembling. He ignored Yumi and looked toward the other side of the room. In front of the entrance stood Dax Sanders and his hundreds of men. Meanwhile, the Derby members were beaten, blood splashed all over the floor. "Who are you?" Old Master Darby asked, looking at Dax. Dax marched forward and replied with a smile. "Dax is my first name and Sanders is my last." "What?" Everyone held their breath. Dax. Dax Sanders? Everyone in Donghai City knew this name. Dax Sanders. Old Master Darby stood up and said, "Oh, the Sanders. What are you doing in Darby Mansion? Why are you getting involved in our family business?" Meanwhile, Yumi recovered from the shock. "Right, Darby had nothing to do with Sanders. Why did you bring your men to the Darby Mansion?" The Sanders were involved in the mafia, and the Darbys could not afford to offend them. However, the Darby clan was the wealthiest in Jiangnan. If they were to fight, the Darbys had more than enough resources to battle with the Sanders. Dax placed his arms behind his back and calmly said, "Of course. I've no interest in involving myself in your family business. But..." He paused, a faint smile appearing on his face. "If you're to offend Daryl, it means you've also offended me." With those words, the hall was in uproar. How did the live-in son-in-law get to know Dax Sanders? How was he so lucky? Yumi was uneasy at the thought but did not dare to make a sound. Old Master Darby went silent for a few moments, and then he locked eyes with Dax. "Young man, you're Dax Sanders, right? I see that you're an honest and loyal man. I'm happy Daryl has a friend like you, but I'll tell you this, Daryl made a mistake, and not just any mistake but something that brought shame to our entire Darby clan. So I must punish him. I want to know what mistake Darry made. What shame did he bring that you had to punish his father? Parents are like the skin of their children. What mistake did he make that you had to burn his father?" Dax growled, clenching his fists. Old Master Darby's face turned green. He was too ashamed to say out loud in front of everyone. Though, some people did not care about whether or not it was embarrassing, such as Yumi. "If you want to know, let me tell you. Daryl went behind our backs to become the Lindens' live-in son-in-law, bringing shame to the Darby clan. Not only that, but he's also a bastard who assaulted his sister-in-law." Yumi sneered with a cold smile. Dax Sanders frowned as she spoke. Of course, he did not believe a single word that she said. He was just confused at how this woman could be so attractive yet have such evil and inhuman personality. "That's enough. I don't want to listen to your nonsense," Dax coldly stated, smacking his axe onto the door pillar. The entire pillar fell apart, making a lug noise and almost brining a few girls to tears. "I'll say this again. I don't believe a single word you said," Dax said, pronouncing every syllable. "From now on, whoever offends Daryl will be killed." With that said, he waved to his men, and they followed him out of the mansion. Huh. Old Master Darby stood frozen, looking in the direction of Dax dubiously. The rest of the family members held their lips tight, not making a sound. Dax's words before he left were loud like a thunder, with his words still ringing in the hall. They would never have thought that punishing Darry would offend someone like Dax Sanders. "Grandpa. Grandpa." Yumi was the first to recover from the shock, holding on to her wounded face. "Dax Sanders just interrupted our family affairs by bringing over his men and hurting our family. This is utterly unacceptable. We can't let them get away with this." Episode 174. Old Master Darby glanced at the hall. The Darby members were lying on the floor, moaning in pain. Blood splashed across the floor, and a few men even seemed to have died. "Call the medics. Take note of the injured members," Old Master Darby ordered, panting breathlessly. Drake, who was by his side, called out for the injured to be taken care of. Feelings of resentment and hatred filled the entire mansion. Yumi's lips were still bleeding, and the slap mark on her face was burning red. "Grandpa, why didn't you fight back just now?" she lashed out, still feeling the burning pain on her face as her eyes were filled with hatred. Old Master Darby had been cultivating for 5 years, and he was currently a level 3 Master General. If he had fought back just now, this would not have happened. He stayed silent as his face darkened. Yumi wanted to continue, but Florian came from the corner he was hiding and cut her short. "Shut up. You saw what happened just now with your own eyes." Dax Sanders came with hundreds of men. How was Grandpa supposed to fight them all? How dare you scream at me? Where were you when Dax Sanders came? You were hiding in the corner peeing your pants, and now that he's gone, you decided to jump out of nowhere to yell at your wife. What kind of men are you? How did I end up marrying useless trash like you? She lashed out at him. The more Yumi talked, the more furious she got. After all, she accused Daryl to save Florian's arse. Yet Florian was yelling at her for that. How unacceptable. Florian's face flushed red instantly, not daring to make a sound at all. He was known to be afraid of his wife, and seeing that Yumi was furious, he immediately shut his mouth. Meanwhile, old Master Darby let out a long sigh. He turned to Drake and said coldly, "Drake, follow me," he said to Drake coldly as he walked out of the living hall. Drake followed swiftly, although he looked calm, his heart was pumping anxiously. As the Darby clan patriarch, he was also to blame since the incident had unfolded to this point. Darby Private Room. This was where old Master Darby spent 5 years cultivating. The private room was not too big with simple furnishings. It was a calming and quiet place, but to Drake, it felt solemn and suppressed. Bam. Once they entered the room, Drake knelt on his knees with guilt on his face. "Dad, I'm to blame for what happened, too. As a clan leader, I didn't resolve the problem at once and ended up troubling you. Even what just happened outside is my fault. Please punish me." Although Drake felt uneasy, he was smart. He knew that if he volunteered to be punished, he might get away with it. Old Master Darby sighed, seeing Drake volunteer to be punished. "Drake, stand back up. It's not your fault," he said. "It's not my fault." Drake thought as he stood up, relieved. "Dad, now that Sanders got involved, what shall we do next?" Drake said carefully. "Since we've reached this stage, I've decided that from today onwards, we will teach our family members to cultivate. We've earned a decent amount of money from doing business throughout the years, but so what if we have lots of money? Money is nothing but something physical outside our bodies." Old Master Darby sighed deeply. From the incident, Old Master Darby suddenly understood the truth. If a clan wanted to live on forever, money was not enough. One needed incredible power and capability, or else, no matter much money the clan had, it would not matter. If all the Darby members had been cultivators, Dax Sanders and his men would have been beaten to death. Luckily, it was not too late to realize this. He wanted the entire clan to start cultivating. Jackson thought. They were unaware of Jackson, who overheard their conversation outside the private room. If the entire clan starts to cultivate, nobody would even dare to offend the Darby clan, including Dax Sanders, Brandon Guy, and Abby Guy. The Darby clan would be unreachable and indestructible. Jackson thought with a deadly look in his eyes as he clenched his fists. "Daryl, I treated you as my brother, yet you assaulted my wife. Fine, all right. Since you've assaulted my wife, I'm going to assault your wife." Jackson thought. Episode 175. Meanwhile, in the private room, Drake was shocked. Turning the entire family into cultivators. How was that possible? Drake thought. But you'd need at least a spiritual herb or spiritual elixir to turn one's body into a cultivator. Spiritual herb and elixir are rare. No matter how wealthy we are, it's impossible to get hold of it without connectins, Drake said. Spiritual herb was what Daryl had ingested. Brandon and Abby Guy had given it to him. After eating the spiritual herb, Daryl turned into a cultivator. Spiritual elixir was derived from spiritual herb, making the elixir pill pure and highly effective. You don't have to worry about this, just do as you're told. Make me a list of the smartest members in our clan, he motioned at Drake to calm down. I know Priest Brian from the Wudong sect. If I ask, he'll supply all of us with the spiritual elixir. Years ago, Priest Brian had given him the easy breath practice that he cultivated. Priest Brian was a high-ranking master in the Wudong sect. For him, getting a hold of the spiritual elixir was not an issue at all. Hearing that, Drake nodded with joy. Yes, Dad. I'll prepare right away. Meanwhile, the clinking of heels could be heard coming from outside the room. Yumi entered the room hastily. Grandpa, we have the list of injured members. 7 members are in the hospital emergency room, not knowing if they're going to live, and another 10 or so are severely injured. Grandpa, when have we ever been insulted to such lengths? We can't sit back and do nothing. Yumi raged through gritted teeth, her face still swollen. Smack. Old Master Darby smacked the table hard, his eyes flaming with rage. This isn't over. Daryl and Sanders, this isn't over. This will never be over. At Donghai City First Hospital. Lily marched hastily in her heels, entering the hospital with a fruit basket in her hands. Behind her was Samantha with an unenthusiastic expression on her face. The mother and daughter caught the eyes of many men in the hallway. Although Samantha was in her 30s, her looks were well maintained, especially her hot body. On the other hand, Lily was charming and dressed in a short skirt that complemented her body shape. The men gulped at the sight of her. Whoever married a woman like her must be a lucky man. Though Lily did not care for the attention, she had mixed feelings about what happened at the Sanders mansion when Daryl had left hastily with Dax right after answering the phone call. She did not know what happened last night. All she knew was that Daryl's father was admitted to the hospital today, severely injured. Lily had never met Daryl's parents before. Recently, Lily has been feeling an increasing sense of security around Daryl. Therefore, she wanted to do her duty of being a daughter-in-law today by visiting him. Lily, is Daryl's father worth visiting? He's not even dead. Just come here yourself. Why did you have to bring me along? I have a facial appointment with my Freeds. Daryl's parents are nobody. It's so embarrassing to visit them. Samantha complained. Mom, keep your voice down. Recently, Daryl seems to be working quite hard, don't discriminate against him. Lily said, biting her lips. Besides, after 3 years of marriage, we've never even met each other's parents. Now that his father's been admitted to the hospital, we should visiting them. This made Samantha speechless for a while. Fine, I'll leave after greeting him. You know, hate coming to the hospital with the germs everywhere, she said. Outside the ward, they heard laughter coming from inside. Lily and Samantha exchanged a look as they halted their steps. Why's there a young woman's voice coming from inside the ward? Didn't you say only Daryl and his mother are inside? Samantha questioned. Lily frowned as she remained silent.
For more episode, don't forget to subscribe.